Let's do it.
All right, we are back, and if you hear my dog whining in the background, just ignore it.
I mean, how can we ignore the dogs? I mean, like I think one of the most popular casts in our first 2 years was the dog cast.
That's infamous for sure. I don't know about popular.
It is. Maybe not popular, but it's, you can. Aren't they somewhat the same? Infamy and popularity. They're.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as bad press is still good press, whatever that.
Oh yeah.
Motto is. Yeah, it's kind of the thing.
P.T. Barnum.
Exactly, Barnum. Like I remember. I think about this periodically, like when I pop in our closed Facebook group. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group, and remember back in the day when we were at like 80 people, and it was like a ghost town filled with tumbleweeds with the occasional interaction. And not that it's like a Reddit competitor by any stretch, but it's kind of crazy to kind of go back to those days and remember kind of how we got here and the people and connecting. And so yeah, it's awesome. So but yeah, we are back today, the day of the week. It's Thursday. It's July 18th, the year. It's 2024. Welcome aboard, everybody. You listen to Crushing Iron Podcast. This is episode 783.
783, yeah. And I just looked it up. The Dogcast was episode number 34.
34. You ever go back and listen?
I have actually. I was like, what the hell did I say? I just talked about Maddie.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, those are the days. I was using like a little headset plugged into my laptop. Yeah, I don't go back and listen because it's just, I think I've talked about it again. It's like the steroid EPO version of listening to yourself in an old school answer machine. It's just, I just not a huge fan of how it sounds. But with this weekend, sounds awesome. It is a jam-packed, slammed weekend. We were kind of like, I think, referencing this without referencing it before we went live today. I think we've got about 15 athletes in Lake Placid. We've got about 7 or 8 in Ohio. Oregon, it seems we've got like freaking close to, again, 10 or 12.
Easy.
And then you got, easy. And then you got a bunch of other races. It's a jam-packed weekend. And I think maybe we said it without saying it, but, I think we're both a little tired this morning heading into the cast. And sometimes these weeks, they're just kind of draining. Like you got athletes that are racing. And again, we kind of talked about it a little bit on Tuesday, and just like the ebbs and flows of managing everyone and their different personalities and how they, even just like how people manage race weeks and how different, people that get way, way up and they're way too excited. You got to hold them back. And I got a text this morning at 5:30, Brian Snell, I'm not sure if I can hold back. It's not my nature. I dropped in this is just to telling you like how good of a mood I'm in right now because the weather is just spot on. I dropped him a GIF, and I'm not a GIF guy.
Oh, you're getting more.
And it was 5:30 in the morning, and I dropped him the Braveheart GIF where he's yelling out "Hold" there at the very, very end, and that was kind of all I gave him this morning. And then you get other ones that are, they get teary-eyed and grateful and emotional. You get other ones that are questioning every single thing they could It's like dealing with a bride and groom in wedding week. You got anxiety, you got excitement, you got fear, you got, do I sure want to do this? And you got, friends telling you you're making mistakes. You got friends telling you this is the best decision. You got mothers-in-laws being crazy. You got things running late. It might storm. You're worried about the weather. Is it going to rain on my wedding day? You got all this. That's basically what it is in race week for coaches, and how the different personalities you deal with and the emotional roller coaster, which is why, year round, you and I both like try to stay super even keel about everything. That way, race week, there's no surprise. We're still even keel. Can't get way up and you can't get way down. It's it is race week. But I think Lake Placid is going to be streamed because it's an Ironman. It's an Ironman point series, so it should be streamed. So it'll be fun to watch. And I have it's on my bucket list to go at least go see at some point. Maybe not go do, just because I heard the venue is pretty spectacular. So yeah, incredibly busy weekend. Then you got, like I said, you got Ohio, which used to be, and honestly, one of my little favorite hometowns of to go visit. And that moved to now I think it's up in Sandusky. Protected swim, sometimes a little rolling, but pretty good temps. And you got Oregon, which pretty sure everyone swims sub 30 there because of how fast that current is. You got super fast, which seems like that's the way Ironman's going these days. They announced Rockford 70.3 right there. If there's ever a wheelhouse that was in Mike Tarrolly's, growing up wheelhouse, that was it. And it's, downstream swim. So I think their writing is on the wall for that kind of stuff. It's, the easier the course, the faster the course, the more entries. Speaking of, I saw the Ironman Wisconsin sold out yesterday.
Oh, it did?
Yeah. You're registered, right?
Yeah, I've triple checked it.
Double check. You didn't let the Glenn Rollbecky registration concierge service handle this transaction, did you?
No, but it's oddly enough, I might trust him more than me. It's, yeah, I keep getting the How to Crush Ironman Wisconsin emails too, so I think I'm in there. Yeah, I'm racing regardless. I'll do legacy. I'll do whatever it takes, but I'll double check it later. I've definitely been training.
You're Mike Tarrolly. You should just drop your name and be like, hey, can yeah. You know what? Bib number 1.
Bib number 1.
We're going to give you bib number 1. But yeah, it's a busy week. They're all busy. Again, hope you all are having an awesome week. And if you're racing, in case we forget to end the podcast with it, best of luck. And your luck is pretty much made by effort and execution. Yeah. That's all you can control. So go out there and do your best. For those of you that aren't racing, if it's your first time tuning in today, welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have quite a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. Time is very valuable. So appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also a lot of race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life, not just as human beings, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. He and I also talk frequently about what our own athletes are going through. He and I work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner-level athletes looking to do their very first 5K or sprint triathlon, all the way up through elite level amateurs trying to get back to our championships and everyone in between from all over the globe. We'll use the feedback loop we have with them and Training Peaks emails, text messages, and the like to drive the discussion today. We also like to utilize our Facebook group. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group. Answer one simple question. We'll let you right in. Awesome people, fantastic community, solid resource in a sport that is oftentimes way too complicated and way too confusing. We offer a safe, actionable space to get great information to hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls that, frankly, we've all made along the way and probably still make plenty of them. And that is it. We have no sponsors and we have no ads, but we do have an agenda, and we're pretty transparent about it. And that's to do our best to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
Yeah, I would just pause in there for a minute in case, because I'm sure some people fast forward through that, and I didn't want them to miss what I said here. And that is, Snell, your normalized power is 110. And don't be messing with that.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, don't tell him that. He wouldn't listen anyway. He barely listens to me.
I know. Well, he was listening when I put the attack on him at the trace.
He sure was.
Actually, he wasn't. He was like, what the hell are you doing? I said, I don't know.
In the attack. Man, yeah. So, yeah, all good time. So we were chatting before the cast about topics for today. And, a lot of times when you're going through, what I consider kind of in the weeds with training and racing, there's almost too many topics to pick one, because they all kind of seem obvious. And the one that's sticking out to me in terms of ones that kind of be top of mind, ones we can kind of get into today, is I was I had 2 interactions yesterday with athletes that I thought were very much the same, but coming from a different direction. And I'm always reminded, I think, and frankly, need reminding that while, you and I have both been in the sport for a long time, and I've been in sport for a very long time, doesn't necessarily mean that everyone else has. And, so I had 2 different conversations yesterday, one email, one phone, and one was asking me a question about aerobic threshold. And I had to explain because I do think in this day and age, like there's so much information that's put out there in words, and then people make assumptions that they know what these words stand for and mean. And I had to kind of go into a little bit of a breakdown of what this threshold means, and that, in my opinion, threshold is just, it's to me is the barrier between one thing to another. But most athletes consider a threshold like your max, right? Your max effort. What's my threshold? My threshold heart rate, my threshold, heart rate, my threshold power, my threshold pace. Well, the term threshold, again, isn't like the doorway considered a threshold. Like you're moving from one room to another, and that is the definition of the word threshold. It doesn't always mean your max. And so I was explaining this athlete, when I use terms like aerobic threshold, it doesn't mean your all out threshold. It's just the kind of the maximum aerobic threshold before you start to teeter onto where you're starting to produce lactic acid versus not. And I had another conversation with an athlete who is a newer athlete asking if they should get a power meter or not, or they should start to, they should still riding by RPE. And I said, stick with RPE. And those 2 conversations might not seem like the same, but but what I was reminded with both of them was that we still don't, and even I don't, like that's why, continuing education and educating athletes, I think is the best way to go about coaching, is to inform and not kind of keep things from athletes and make you like the gatekeeper of all information. And knowledge is power, and educating athletes should be, a coach, one of the coach's biggest, roles. Is that when you jump into the sport, which a lot of people do, they go out and they buy a tri-bike, they go out and they get a smart trainer, and they hop on, erg mode, and they get a power meter, and they get they get all these things for, GPS watches, and you're immediately throwing yourself in this really like this, I don't want to say uninformed, but you're throwing yourself in the deep end of all of this information and data that you really don't necessarily know what to do with it. And I picture most athletes is, jumping into the sport with every watch and every gadget and every metric on their dashboard and Training Peaks, and tracking their CSS and pace in the pool, and tracking their CTL and Training Peaks, their what's the training stress score, comparing all my data points, and what was my power here, and what was my heart rate, drift, at this portion of the run. And I pictured these athletes and they stars walking up to the very edge of like a 10-foot deep ball pit. Like you've got at the, at the, like that, old school, like Chuck E. Cheese, or, all these like, kid places, and all the small little balls, and jumping in, and every little ball is like all these pieces of information and data, and they just jump right in. And frankly, it's pretty hard to get out of those things. And they can't get out, and they can't tell what is what. They can't tell which ball is what. All they know is they're surrounded by information, and they're not exactly sure what makes sense and what doesn't. Really going back to the amount of inputs we just talked about on Tuesday in terms of how many inputs can go into the ultimate, data point, which is the output. And they just jump into a pool of inputs and are expected to kind of learn on the fly, or learn on the job. And it also distracts them from, I think, at the core of most performance-based improvements and knowledge, and what you need the most on race day, which is, how do you feel? What does it feel like? And not being interrupted, and not being so chaotic with your decision making based on the numbers that are spit out with you. And so I think every athlete, I think, should be encouraged to either do their own due diligence on what things mean and what they don't mean, but also to start off slow. and to remove these things. You and I are both a fan of having athletes race blind, no watch, and or even race blind totally, and experiment with what that's like, and then right off feel sometimes. Hey coach, I'm not sure if you messed up or not, but the ride today isn't pre-built. I'm like, yeah, I know, and it's on purpose. Go ride aerobic, breathe through your nose, done, period, bye. Not that hard. Listen to your body, right? And it's amazing to me, I think, as we distance ourselves from the chrono age, right, of the Timex sports watch, of the of the spreadsheet, and the kind of old school ways that still frankly work really, really well, and the RPE scale of I remember listening to an interview with a world class professional coach who I think is sending like 7 or 8 athletes to the Olympics this year from various countries. This is like 3 or 4 years ago. And they were saying that yes, they use Training Peaks as a way to deliver sessions, but what he pays the most attention to is a spreadsheet with a 1 to 10 RPE scale on each session. And he tracks from Training Peaks to a spreadsheet. And you're talking about the best athletes in the world fighting for a gold medal, and their coach is still relying on spreadsheet. And the athletes are still told to go off of RPE, and the athletes are still given not wide ranges, but even ranges within intervals. Do 2 or do 3 or do 4 based on how you feel. We were even talking about before the podcast about about eyeballs and paying attention to an athlete's form or how an athlete's feeling. And I think in this day and age, you've got to be very, very good at just it kind of like reading text verbal cues. Like if you're having a conversation with somebody and they're usually pretty, they're dropping 3 to 4 sentences, and all of a sudden they drop in a K. Well, one, you either know that they're pissed at you or that they're upset. That's a pretty easy cue, right?
Mine's the ellipsis. That's the one that
the dot.
They're indifferent. They're not really vested in the conversation.
Oh yeah. And
whatever.
Some people use that freely, and I'm like, what the fuck is that even used for? Like, hey, I'm racing this weekend. ... Like, is that to be continued? Is that turn the page to see the next chapter?
Yeah, but it's always something like I need you to pay more attention to me, or something like that.
It's a stay tuned. Stay tuned for more updates, and follow me on YouTube on my channel. Anyway, so it's so paying attention, seeing how I feel, because again, like we even talked about this again before the podcast, not necessarily related to training and metrics, but how easily I think athletes can and do lie to themselves within training, not necessarily because they're doing it on purpose, but because they allow so much misinformation to pollute what feels what, or they're so far away from understanding what is the right way to feel, right? Because they are so. We had this conversation Sunday. Like I rarely use all caps. I'm not an all caps guy. Frankly, I find it insulting. and I wrote in stop all caps moving your workouts, period. And continued on with a few other sentences, kind of wasn't scolding. I was just kind of my point needed to be made. And they commented back like, hey, thank you for a comment. You're right. I let my inner voice of guilt and my like insecurities get the best of me. I was like, that was just a really true, honest, vulnerable, admission that they aren't able to govern those feelings and effort. And I think it's again, like when we get so obsessed with numbers and we focus so much on numbers that we lose sight of it, but also not only are you losing sight of how you feel, but the chances are and this isn't meant to be rude, but the chances are the majority of athletes that look through all the data don't really know what they're looking at. I can look at a dry erase board of calculus equations and I can see it. I can tell you exactly what it says, but I have zero effing clue what it actually means and what it equals. And I think that is a trap that athletes fall into, is they are unsure and frankly uneducated in what means what and what is actually meaningful in what situations, and then they base decisions off of inaccuracies. And then that decision, it now results in another decision based on a previous inaccuracy, and all of a sudden you make a left when you should have taken a right, and now you're 5 miles away from your destination instead of at it. And I think a lot of it starts at the beginning, like it's your very beginning of your athlete journey, by starting out small, by listening to how your body feels, by going off effort, seeing what feels like what, doing even when you start to rely and pay attention to data, still every single time go off what your body feels like, and don't ignore one siren going off because 2 or 3 bells are still staying put. And I think it's just a great lesson in educating and reminding ourselves that even if you know everything, even if you plan the perfect workout, even if you think, you're right on plan and target, nobody in this earth has ever been able to predict exactly how an athlete will feel the next day during a session. That the only thing that is you can plan for everything, but it's ultimately up to the athlete to execute based on how they feel. And that takes a lot of responsibility and a lot of listening on the athlete's part.
Yeah. There's that saying, don't judge a day by the weather. And I'd like to add something to that, or a workout by the first 20 minutes. So it's like, you were talking earlier about using your eyes, and the swim coach that you asked, what you use technology or any kind of gadgets for the training or whatever. And he's been around the sport forever. He said, no, I just use my eyes. I watch. And see, this is the thing, I've been using the power a little bit this time. And, I see why people are into it, but I've got a little mixed bag. I think it's like, it's good to have and it's good to know. But like you said about the balls, man, there's just like so much, there's just like endless wormholes you can go down. And for me, it's just kind of okay, I've been most of my life an RPE guy, as you know. And I just, there's and it goes back to things like, what's that quote, heal thyself or something like that. And, or Hippocrates says, a man isn't his own doctor, is a fool, or something like that. And I just think it's because, you can get wrapped up in data points and all these types of things. But if you don't understand your body, and if you're not seeing yourself, one of my favorite books that I go back to, sort of a reference book, is called Take Off Your Glasses and See. I've always had glasses. And there's so many great things in there about just being able to like look at things rather than to like be pinpoint on little things that really don't matter in the big scope. And to me, that's what your analogy with those balls means, is like, there's just so many distractions in there. But if you really pay attention to your breathing and just your flow and trying to relax and all these types of things, I think, to me, those data points, just this is me personally, they constrict me as a athlete. It's like, who cares if, like, some of these receivers in the NFL or whatever, they're like super fast on the 40, but they can't make cuts. They don't know how to flow with that. It's just like I'm not saying all of them, obviously they're very athletic and things like that, but to me, that point doesn't mean shit if you can't get open.
Yeah, if you're not a good route runner, it's irrelevant. You're just a deep ball threat. You don't have any other use.
Right. So, and if you can't work your way through problems, for example, with all you people racing this weekend, I'm going to just remind you that this is going to be hard as shit. Your race, it's not going to, you may have trained almost perfectly. Everything's great. That doesn't mean you're going to go out there and it's just going to feel like a walk in the park. At some point, you're going to have to really find yourself and dig deep and get through some shit. And this is the part we forget, I think, sometimes. And it's like, how do you do that? Like if there's a great example, and our buddy Corey Coggins,
Mm.
Goes back to, we were racing Chattanooga, and we got out of the water roughly the same time, and we were on the bike, and I wasn't racing with power or anything. I was just like, I was kind of feeling it a little bit. And we pretty much were together, I don't know, probably 80 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he was trained up. We were, probably in the same ballpark, and he was always, a good athlete, a great Ironman, everything. And I remember he said to me, we were just kind of cooking along mile 80, 90 in that Chattanooga course. And he said, man, I got to back up. My watt average is too high or whatever. And I was like, all right, dude, I'll see you later. And and he, by all rights would usually beat me, but I got off that bike and I just somehow thundered through that run, and I got about halfway through and I saw him going the other way, and he's like, man, what the? And I just went, it hurt like hell, but for whatever reason, I just kept going, and to this day, it's still my fastest Ironman. But I just think it's interesting, like to me, I can hurt with this, power meter, I can hurt at 150 watts just as similar as I am at 190. It's like I'm always curious as to why things are what they are, and I watch, and we talked about Vingegaard and Pogačar the other day, and I was watching him the other night. I mean, the dude is just like, I just think he feels good and he explodes sometimes, and obviously he's very smart. He's leading the Tour de France. And I think it's interesting to look at the Tour as sort of a microcosm of training, because certain days he'll just slap in the peloton, and that's like an off day for him, which is weird to think about. But, he's probably just riding like a zone 2 ride for the most of the day. And then the next day he'll just be blasting up a mountain, man, like shattering, records. And I know obviously he's riding with power, but I mean, he just seems to me like a really big feel guy.
I believe it was him, and I could be wrong, but I'm almost certain it was him that when he won his first tour, he was the one that his power meter was broken on stage 20, the last stage to win the tour. No one tries to win on the last day. It's more of a celebration. Mm-hmm. And his power meter didn't work, and he just went after it. He had absolutely no idea what he was pushing. He just knew he needed to win and wanted to win and to go for it. And he won, and it was a huge upset. I'm almost positive it was him. And it just it reminds me always, like when you're, when we're out there coaching, like on course for these races, and you ask an athlete, how's it going? They're like, they say things like, oh, I feel good, or I'm not feeling so great, or I feel pretty solid right now. Like, to me, they don't have to say, hey, I'm not on pace right now. On pace for what? Mm. What do you mean on pace? That's one of my least favorite phrases. I'm not on pace right now. I mean, I'm not on pace. Like, who told you what pace you're supposed to run the day, and when did that person think they were in charge? It doesn't work like that. That's why, like, understanding how you feel. I feel really good, or I don't feel that great, or I feel strong, or I'm starting to struggle a little bit, or I feel like my nutrition isn't working, or it's never, I'm only 20 seconds off my pace, coach. Like, what pace? Like, where did you come up with this? And it's just funny because you put so many eggs in this basket during training that you think is all about data and numbers. And yes, those are important to an extent. They must be reviewed and they must be taken into account. But then on race day, you show up with an empty basket. And you don't understand what feels like what. You're not able to use that. The best gauge you're able to have, the best supercomputer is you. The person with the most knowledge about your body and your capabilities in a real-time scenario is you. No one else can do that but you. That's why you also you have to take ownership and take the liberty of reining things back some, or like you said, or throttling it down. You have to have that skill, and you have to build that skill, right? And something like you said, sometimes you just have to just go with it. And you have to remember, I think I've referenced this, but like some of the best half marathons I've done in 70.3s and fulls, I've thrown away 3 heart rate monitors during races before. Ironman Arizona, which is my Ironman PR, Chattanooga 70.3, which is where I ended up on the podium, and then Augusta 70.3, which is my fastest 70.3 run to date. All 3 of them, I threw my heart rate monitor either to a person that was watching and hope to get it back, or in Arizona, I just threw it in the trash can. Mile 1.5. Through my heart rate monitor and my. This is shameful. I was doing this. This is like shows you how long in the game I've been. And I threw my heart rate monitor and my Nathan belt in the trash can. And I was like, I'm not carrying this extra weight, and I'm not paying attention to my heart rate. Get out of here. And ran one of my best marathons ever. And my Ironman PR. I refused because it was messing with my understanding of who I was that day. And for some reason, and again, on those 3 days, for some reason, I just had it. And you can't explain it. And that's also fine. Just like some days you can't explain, you could be totally rested and slept well and fueled well and stress is low and lay a total egg. Just lay a total egg. Because the body is a mystery, and it's also the body is in charge. It doesn't owe you a printout report after each race of why it acted or responded or didn't respond to, your attacks. Or, it's like if you listen to the guys at the tour, they'll just say, I just didn't have the legs today. I wanted to go, but my body wouldn't let me. Like, these are the most trained people on the planet. They've got carloads full of people with computers and tracking data. They're swallowing, pills to track their core temp. They got to shit out later. Like, these are the levels of extent like these people are going to track and make every perfect precise decision that they can make every second and plan perfectly. And it's still not perfect. So you take to say, I don't know what happened today. I just didn't have it. And that's and again, like your body doesn't do a printout report. It doesn't, you don't comment in Training Peaks and your body also says, well, Johnny wanted me to really just push the tempo at the zone 3, but I just said, fuck it. I didn't really feel like doing it today. So I didn't. Haha. Your body doesn't do that. Or he wanted me to, to do threshold for, 3 times 10 minutes. But what he doesn't remember is he shoved me full of queso margaritas last night. So this is what he gets. I mean, to be fair, it'd be pretty awesome if it did say that, because then maybe we learn a lesson sometimes about fueling and sleep and recovery. But you don't get it. So you're kind of left in a mystery of why things happened. And a lot of times the answer is you're never going to know. You're never going to know of why it happened and why it clicked or why it didn't and why you flopped. You have no idea. No clue. Zero. And again, like that's why you have to just kind of like let it brush aside. You can go back and look at what got you there. Again, all the inputs that maybe led to that output. And sometimes they'll be explainable. It's just frankly, sometimes they won't. And those are the days where you got to ride the wave of feeling incredible, and just laying it down when you had no business laying it down. And the other days you just got to kind of grind it out and listen to yourself and just try to get home in one piece. Right? Just try to listen to your body and be like, God, this is just absolutely miserable. And the funny part is they oftentimes happen on like consecutive days or within like a 3-day span. You'll have like an amazing workout, then a terrible one, or a terrible workout, and the next day will be an amazing one. Because that's oftentimes what you see in Training Peaks. Like, oh, this was so much better. Not even from yesterday, but this is so much better than this morning's workout. Like, that just goes to show you like how quickly the body can turn on a dime. And so, yes, the information that it puts out is important, but it cannot be the only thing that you try to learn. Learn yourself, learn what feels correct, and trust yourself. In my opinion, you're a better suited trusting yourself and your feel and your decision making than you are with your predetermined package race plan of watts, pace, heart rate, and effort. Because it is what it is, and like I was having a discussion with a coach a few months ago about heart rate versus power in the hotter months. And now heart rate is such a great thing to go by because, what your heart is what your heart is doing and what your heart is pumping is actually what dictates and what determines like when you start to produce lactate, not power. So if you like, if Mike, if you're going by power and you're, you know, your 240 watts is the tipping point to where normally, again, we'd always talk about zones in color of a rainbow. There's no definite end and beginning, right? There's always a blur, and there's usually an overlap based on how you feel. But let's say your usual, according to the numbers, your 240 is when you start to produce, lactate versus, and you're no longer storing glycogen. Now you have to use glycogen for energy and to combust the lactate you're producing. Let's say 240 is that number. And that usually has a heart rate of like 150 for you. Well, if you go out in like 3 weeks and the weather is incredible and you just got it, Badgers played at 3:00 in the afternoon, upset Alabama. You're living the dream. You went to bed early, you got up, you hop on the bike, and you're doing some intervals, and all of a sudden you're doing 250 watts, but your heart rate's 130. Push higher, because if you want to get that stimulus, then push higher, because 250 is no longer the tipping point, right? And same goes for if you stayed up late, Wisconsin loses on a last second field goal to Alabama, and you stayed up late, had some trunk cookies, got up, and you're at heart rate like 160 at only like, at 250 watts. Well, it's time to bring it back to maybe like 235, maybe even 230, because you're starting to produce lactate a lot earlier. And heart rate is what you feel, right? You don't, in my opinion, you don't feel necessarily power. You feel what the power you're producing sends and is required from a body that elicits a heart rate, and that's what you kind of go by how you feel, right? Because that also determines on your respiratory rate. How quickly or how calmly are you breathing, right? So like on a maybe an easier scale, if you're doing 240 watts and you're usually breathing in and out of your mouth because you're tipping to the point of like you're being more anaerobic. But 3 weeks from now, we do that same ride, and you're breathing the whole thing in and out through your nose. Keep pushing, baby. Keep pushing. And that's or again, same thing. If you're starting to breathe in out of your mouth at 225 watts, then it's probably a good idea to stay there. Or again, even better, maybe it's time to not do this today, and breathe in and out of your nose, and have it be a session with oxygen, not without. And again, because those are the things that you feel. You cover up your head unit, and you're as good as going by feel as anybody. And that's why I think it's such a great idea to tell people to do this and encourage them to, beginning of their runs, beginning of their workouts, to, cover up their head unit, cover up their watch. Don't look at it until like, the first mile or two or after 20 minutes. And tell yourself what you think you're doing and try to make a decision. Because a lot of times, the metric that we might have as an output that's our watch's reading or whatever is really just going to be confirmation. Because if you're listening enough, you can know what the decision is going to be today or how you're going to feel today, right? And so I think that's, I think that's just a huge piece of the pie, is understanding that and listening to that, and also knowing that you can still get the responses you need by listening to your breath and listening to your heart, not always obsessing about the numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll go back to that, what I was saying earlier about don't judge anything for that first 30 minutes at least, especially if we're deep into training, because how many times, you go out and you might not have it. You're like, this is going to be the worst, wow, everything's down, whatever, it sucks. And then an hour later, you're feeling amazing. And that's what I mean, I think, a lot of times by why I'm interested in power. And but sometimes, and it doesn't necessarily depend on the weather for me. It does, I'm sure, on some level. But some days I can feel amazing, even when it's hot. And, pushing more watts is easy. And I think you just kind of explained why that probably is. It's something, to do with oxygen and getting better and having a lower heart rate for some reason. But there's a lot of shit like that. And, you're talking about Arizona and how that's your best Ironman and you had it that day. And I agree with that. I think that's huge. I also think that there's just, like, I was talking to an athlete the other day who's doing Placid. He's done a bunch of Ironman. and hasn't, probably trained as exactly like he would want it. But he told me the other day he kind of had this weird, like first Ironman nerves and anxiousness. And I said, well, that's probably a good thing, man, because, I as I face more and more of these beasts, I think it was my first few were mental a lot, because I almost feel like I feel the same when I get off the bike on a lot of levels. It's just that I had more in my will early on, because it was more driven by fear or just, purpose or something like that. And now you get, later in the game, it gets to the hard part for me becomes, well, I've already done this, a million times. Do I really have to put myself through that, pain on the run or whatever? I think that we can sort of acquiesce and sort of live on our laurels. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, really, mainly because I know that, that run has never felt great for me, any run I've ever done at Ironman. But certain ones I just, for whatever reason, can dig deeper. And I don't know what that is necessarily, or how to always fix that, but I think it's got something to do with just, being there, being in that moment and not like getting overwhelmed by it, because it's just, it's like when I'm running sometimes and you just, like you're saying, you don't look at everything. You're just blind out there and you kind of look down and like, oh, this is pretty nice. You're not even really trying, and you kind of have a pace that you never really thought you would, and it feels easy. I don't know. And sometimes I just feel like that's when you take that monkey off your back and the pressure, and you're just letting yourself flow. And I think that, even though, you can do flat Ironmans, but they all feel like they're going uphill the whole day. You know what I mean? So, it's just, perseverance and patience and, cause even after, last few years out there where I've had, subpar races and felt like shit the whole day or whatever, I don't feel that bad the next couple of days. So it's like, okay,
right.
What, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not an injury or anything. It's just like, what's your pain tolerance today? Or, what's your inflammation tolerance or something, maybe is a better way to say it. But, it's just interesting, man. It's a puzzle for sure. It's a mental, physical puzzle. Maybe my mom should start coaching because she's good at puzzles.
Well, I mean, like the athletes that, like I think there's something that I'm not trying to make it a generational thing, but there's just certain things that we have become accustomed to feeling like we need that aren't necessities.
It's a societal thing, I think.
Right,
yeah.
it is.
In the generation, some people are more susceptible than others. How's that?
Yeah. I mean, like, to give you an example, like Allie told me she was at the grocery store checking out with Hayden, and one of the guys bagging groceries, making a comment about like one of the drinks they were getting and how there was like, there's some not manhunt, but like there's a treasure hunt to find like $1 million. And she was like, I don't know anything about that. And he was like, oh, it's on YouTube. And she just said, well, he doesn't, we don't let him to watch that kind of stuff. And he said, good. My parents gave me 0 restrictions, and I can pretty much tell you're doing the right thing. I was like, it's kind of scary. But no, it is like, there's like, you think you need more stuff because you have it, and you think it's more things to be like, you're depending on things that you don't need to depend on because they're there. If you like, and we get this question a ton as coaches, like with the numbers that are in, that are provided by Training Peaks, they're a selling point and a decoration. That's it. They are, and frankly, for a lot of athletes, they're addictive. I can't tell you, and you're the same boat, how many athletes we have gotten over the years that have come to us because I'm obsessed with like the CTL and ATL numbers and Training Peaks, and like I'm overtraining and I can't think. Like, you're addicted. You're addicted to overtraining because you're obsessed with numbers that frankly, you probably don't understand. Training Peaks just splatters them across the board to make you feel reliant. Oh, I can't, Coach. Just so you know, my workout didn't upload today. Okay, I'm not sweating it. Didn't your body do it? Your body knows. So we won. We got the adaptation we wanted to. Yeah. No, but here's a screenshot of it. I don't need a screenshot of it. Just tell me that you did it, right? But it's at 100% an addiction and a need. And the more, honestly, the more shit that's out there like that, the worse off people usually become. Because they get so obsessed with seeing the green in Training Peaks, or everything's perfect, or, like, can you move over my run today to tomorrow for me? Because I don't want it to be red. That's not my job. Just do the run tomorrow. If I get to do it, I'll move. It might sound like callous, but the more you enable people to be so obsessed with how it is, you're just feeding into the problem, which is no longer paying attention to the world around them and what they need to do to get focused and what actually matters than how things look on a dashboard on your laptop or your green streak or how it'll show up in Strava. Like that's no, friends, that's Instagram stuff. If you did the workout, you did the workout. Your body knows exactly what was done. No matter what day it was, doesn't matter what's populated, doesn't matter. I mean, I still have quite a few athletes who won't upload until they still plug their watch into the laptop. And it doesn't happen until the weekend. And they are some of the most, if not the most, consistent athletes that I work with. Period. Because the work is the work. And so when you get obsessed with these numbers that you talking about inputs, like your metrics are totally wrong in Training Peaks. Your zones are totally wrong. You're letting, Training Peaks set zones for you based on a workout that you did, which is also probably based on being miscalibrated or the best day you've ever had, or your zones, or you're doing wrong zones in the first place, or your threshold is way off. It's just, it's crap in and crap out, frankly. It just is. And to make people obsess about that it's counterproductive. And it honestly, it makes more people, I'll just tell you this right now, and I'm not going to say this is fact, but I'd put money on it, that the Training Peaks dashboard and seeing people's, chronic training load, acute training load, and their quote unquote, their form leads to more damage and overtraining than anything else in Training Peaks, especially with a self-coached athlete, because they start to cringe if they see their form go down and they just want to overtrain. And because they believe that the higher their chronic training load, the better. Doesn't mean anything. It is irrelevant. The best load for you is the best load for you. And so I can't encourage you enough. And I tell people this all the time. Stop paying attention to it. Like, hey, I don't know if you look at this. I'm like, I don't. I just pay attention to each workout. I look at trends, and then we make decisions and we move on. And we're pretty great at it. It's not about obsessing about the numbers on the dashboard that are built on, frankly, calculations that I blatantly disagree with, like the TSS score. Just tell me how you feel, right? That's why your most common response in Training Peaks is, how'd this feel? How'd you feel on this? How did it go? Not, hey, what was your metric on split 2? Like, just tell me how I felt. Did it feel good? Great. Did it feel terrible? Let's adjust. Moving on. That's all I got today. I said I didn't have anything, but apparently I did.
Well, like it.
I didn't tell you what I had after 20 minutes. I let myself come around.
Well, that's how it goes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, normally it's like we talk about all the time. I think our podcast does negative split usually. It's like we're kind of meandering around in the water for a while, and then we kind of find our groove.
Yeah, around in the water.
I mean, that's how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
That's how training goes. I can't reiterate that enough. How do you feel? Like, I mean, if you're gonna really have to, like, I don't know. I just can't hang my head on something I did 3 months ago. I mean, how do I feel right now? I feel good going forward. I got about 8 weeks to train, and my body feels pretty solid right now. And I'm not going to force anything. I'm just going to keep moving. And like I always say, I just goal is to feel the best I ever felt on race day. That's it.
That's it.
Just, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just so weird that I'll never, and most people won't even come close to running a marathon and then run it. So what does that mean?
And it's funny you say that, because I was like, we never, I don't think we can ever really truly remember what feeling our best feels like.
No.
I think we can kind of get glimpses of it because it's so different based on where we are in life, our age, how many races we've done, what our training's been like, what life stress is like. Feeling your best now is going to be totally different than what you're feeling your best was 2 or 3 years ago. And same with me. Like, this is, like, it's all very, very, very different. That's why I like keeping a close, I think, monitor on what things are doing and how things are feeling in real time and how they've been, not what they were 6 months ago, right? Is just so important, because that's a true gauge of what you can expect, right? Not, well, I felt good on this day 3 years ago, but my life was totally different. My training was perfect. Didn't have any injuries. Never got sick. Wasn't married. Didn't have any kids. Work was perfect, and it was a perfect day, and it felt awesome. This is my result. And 3 years later, married, 2 kids, travel 5 days a week, every other week. Life is crazy, super stressed, had a few niggles. You're feeling quote unquote best for your race that year. Totally different, because you're a totally different person. Everything. That's why I just keeping a real time feel of what feels good and what doesn't is just so important to recalibrate each week, even on what feels like what, right? How things feel, what's the reality of this, and then adjusting accordingly. Again, not obsessing about and holding on for dear life for, what felt good even 6 months ago. Your feel good run right now, if the weather's shit, might be a 10.5 minute mile. And your what feels good, 4 months ago might be a 9:20 mile, because that's what it feels like outside. And that affects how you feel inside and how you feel as a runner. That same goes for how you felt 3 days ago when it was 110 degrees and you wake up this morning here in the Midwest, baby, and it's 60 degrees, you're going to feel like a champion. But if you're obsessed with like the pace you did last week, then you're going to run that and you're going to miss an opportunity to have fun and go run and push it a little bit, for sure. It's just, if you're listening, we're over athletes. If you're getting this freaking golden weather right now, go have some fun. go see your fitness, right? Take a trip, go see your fitness, because you've been isolating the last 2 or 3 weeks because of the heat. So again, if you're one of our athletes, go see your fitness, baby. Go knock on that door and have fun. Don't hold back because we say hold back. Go see that fitness.
Good time.
Go see that fitness.
Pay attention.
As always, we love you guys. We appreciate you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you're looking for coaching that's right for you, make sure you click on our coach tab and look through the coaches and find the one that you think fits the best personality for you. And if you need help doing that, you can always ask, and we will do our best to pair you with the perfect coach. As always, if you need anything from Mike, he's available, Mike at c26triathlon.com. If you need anything from me specifically, I am at Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right. Respect the distance this weekend, everybody.
Yeah, and go see your fitness.
Yes. All right, man. I'll catch you later. See you.